Today, start on.
Good morning.
Morning. Start on Ayin Zion, Amar Aleph. Ayin Zion, Amar Aleph. Okay, we're going to start with Masnisin Deloy Ki Haitana. It's about 8 lines up from the bottom of the page. Thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. It's supposed to be learning Hashem the Beis Hamikdash immediately. We learned in the Mishnah a machlekes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, talking about karbanis that the limbs of the karban got confused. Chatas got confused with an oila. Rabbi Eliezer says, don't worry about it, you just put it on the mizbeach. And a chatas is not supposed to go on the mizbeach, an oila is supposed to go on the mizbeach, not a chatas. The burnt offering is supposed to get burnt. The sin offering is supposed to get eaten. So what do you do about that? He says, don't worry about that. That you just imagine that it's fuel. Because you don't put the chatas up as if it's an offering. You put it up as if it's fuel for another offering. Not that you're offering this chatas on because it's not supposed to be it's not supposed to be offered on the mizbeach. So it's just being burnt. In other words, like when it becomes possible, you burn it. So okay, you're burning it, and with that burning it, you use it as fuel for other karbanos. We said this was, and the Chachamim say no. The Chachamim say you just let it spoil, and then you burn it as it's spoiled. Now, this was a machlekes because you confused limbs of a sin offering with limbs of a burnt offering. The Gemara now says Masnisan like Tana. It seems like our Mishnah doesn't fit with the following Tana, because we have a machlekes between Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim in our Mishnah, and we're going to see that there's an opinion that the machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim is actually different. The Tanya was started in a brayso from Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says this is the Tana that our Mishnah doesn't fit with. Rabbi Yehuda says there's no machlekes regarding a varichatas, limbs of a sin offering that got confused with limbs of a burnt offering, because over there everyone agrees sheyikravu, that you bring it. What do you bring it for? You bring it as if it's fuel. Everyone would agree with Rabbi Eliezer if that was the type of confusion. And the same is that they would agree, but in the opposite way. Let's say it was an animal that sin was committed with it. So, and it's definitely not supposed to go on the altar, but the limbs of a sacrifice got confused with limbs of this animal. So everyone would agree, that you don't bring it. So in other words, basically, everyone would agree, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if it's holy, it's supposed to go on the altar. If it's unholy, it's not supposed to go on the altar. My nechlaku, but what about the machlekes? How did it get there? It was a mistake. So what was the machlekes? Alevari oila tmima shenesarvu beivari balasmum. Machlekes is somewhere in the middle. If I have limbs of a carbon that's supposed to go on the altar, and I have limbs of a carbon that's a balmum. Now the rule with the balmum is that once it's put on the altar, you don't take it down. So here we're asking, because it's b'di'evet k'shasat chakdami, right? Or shasat chak b'di'evet, because over here I don't have what to do. So should I view it as after the fact and bring it up or not? Rabbi Eliezer says you can bring it up. What do you do? You're not supposed to be putting limbs of a animal that has a blemish on the altar. I'm just viewing it. I'm not offering it. I'm viewing it as if it's wood. So in other words, you make like this condition. If this is the limbs of the oila, then this should be offered. And if it's the limbs of the balmum, then this should be considered just firewood. The Chachamim say, you don't bring it up. Okay. What did we get from this whole thing? That our Mishnah that says that the machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim is about a varioila that got mixed up with the chatas is not Rabbi Yehuda's view. Rabbi Yehuda would hold that a vari oila that got mixed up with the chatas is put on the mizbeach. Either way, either it was a mistake or they found that after.
But that was after.
Right. Now, 1 second. I have 3 cases here. All right. I have a case of oila that got mixed up with the chatas. I have a case of oila that got mixed up with reiva v'nirva. The sin was committed with the animal. I have a third case of oila that got mixed up with an oila that's a balmo. So the first 2 cases is not a machlekes. The first case, everyone agrees that you bring it on the altar. Case number 2, everyone agrees that you don't bring it on the altar. Case number 3 is the machlekes. So do you bring it up or not? So now the Gemara is going to. So far, all we said was that doesn't fit with our Mishnah, because our Mishnah said the machlekes is in case number 1. You could see it. Usually a balmum you could see from beforehand. That's usual. The only thing is you can't tell on the limbs that it's a balmum because maybe the mum was on the head. And this now you're looking at the legs because it's all chopped up, and you have to bring it on the altar. So now it's confused. Yeah, they didn't put a serial number on each limb. So it goes like this. The Gemara asks, Rabbi Lezer, Maishna Reva B'Nierva Deloy Chazu. Why does Rabbi Lezer say, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that you don't put the animal that the sin was committed with it, if it gets mixed up with the carbon oil, you don't put those limbs on the altar. And with the chazu means fit. It's not fit. It's not suitable. It's not suitable to go on the altar. So you can't put a balmum, you can't put an animal with a defect on the altar either. It's also not fit to go on the altar. So why is Rabbi Lezer being lenient about the balmum? You put it on the altar, and when it comes to the Reva V'Nirva, he says no. Okay, I could think of a logical answer. Say this one is worse because it's a sin was committed to it. I mean, it's considered disgusting. This is considered just unfortunately nebuch. It got a mum while it was walking. It stepped on a nail. I don't know. It was only be put to death if there were 2 witnesses. Right. Right. So, but the Gemara is asking that the fact is that this is not fit and this is not fit. In other words, even though you can find differences, but in this aspect itself, maybe they should be the same because both of them are not fit for the altar. Just looking at this aspect of it. The Gemara is asking, what should the difference be? So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna explains that what type of mum was Rabbi Lezer being lenient about and saying that it can go on the altar? That's Bedukin Sheba'ayin. It's talking about that it had that slit on the eyelid, which is a very minor mum. And that's why we're going to let it on the altar. Why do we let that on the altar? It's following the view of Rabbi Akiva that says that a mum on a sacrifice, which is in the eyelid, if it goes on the altar, then you don't take it down. I thought every mum. Oh, it depends if it was mum and bakay. If it was bakaydish, I think. I thought all of the cases. I don't remember. Do you remember which ones were? What page that was on? Im alula yardu. Once it goes on the altar, you don't take it down.
Is this talking about a specific case about this item? Was it like a category of like very minor things that are?
Means are there other things in this category? Or possibly. This is a type of category. Texas mentions that this is a type of mum that would not invalidate a bird. So, and also remember that that Gemara in Gittin, where the sacrifice that the king was sending, the bar kamsa put into it the slit in the eyelid, because the non-Jews don't consider it a mum. Anyway, Rabbi Akiva holds that if once it goes on the altar, it doesn't come down. So therefore, Rabbi Eliezer would hold that similar to this is the same thing, that since once it goes on the altar, it doesn't come down. So therefore, if I don't know what to do, I can put it on the altar even lechatchila, because it's all mixed up. However, if it would be the reiva v'nirvav, would be the animal that bestiality was performed with it, so then that would have to come off the altar. So then I don't say that. Gemara asks, "Eima dam Rabbi Kiva diyavad." Rabbi Kiva only says once it's on the altar, you don't take it down. Once it's up there. But lechatchila miyamar. But lechatchila, do you actually go ahead and you put it on the altar? According to what we're saying, Rabbi Les is going to hold that in this mixture you're going to put it on the altar. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa explains Achmayaskinan kigain she'olu al gabi kevesh. Talking about that everything was brought to the ramp. From the ramp, and if you remember that Mishnah that says that by the Karban Tamid, they brought everything to the ramp, and then they used other people to bring it up. It was like there was two steps to the process. First, they put it down on the ramp, and then they brought it up. So what happened over here is that they brought it to the ramp, and once it's on the ramp, then that has a certain status as if it's already up on the altar. So that's what Rav Papa is suggesting here. Talking about a case where it came to the ramp. Just like Rabbi Kiva holds, and once it goes on the Mizbeach, you don't take it down. So Rabbi Eliezer would allow that once it's on the ramp to bring it up to the Gemara says, Yihachi. If that's the heter, you see the ramp is considered sort of like on the altar already. Gemara says, if that's the case, then why are we saying that it was a confusion of which sacrifice it was? We don't know. Is it this one? Is it that? We don't know which sacrifice because it's all mixed up. The truth is that if we're dealing with a balmum and it was brought to the ramp, and Rabbi Akiva holds that once it goes up, you don't take it down, and Rabbi Les is saying that once it's on the ramp, it's as if it's up, then why does there have to be a confusion between which sacrifice is it? Is it the correct one or is it the balmum one? Even if it's not the correct one, even if it's the balmum one on its own, it should still be brought up and not brought down. Afilo beinayu. Beinayu means even if it's while it's be'en, means in its original state, without the mixture of the other sacrifice. The Gemara answers, Ella, we're going to have to say because of this. Time of the Rebbe Lezer, niyat rachmana. It's not because of the slit on the eyelid, which is not considered a mum according to Rabbi Akiva, or such a mum. It says the pasuk says. Mum bam hu de la yiratzu. It says that if it has a blemish in it, then it's not going to be an appeasement for the person. So we're going to learn like this. Mum bam hu de la yiratzu. If it has a blemish in it, it's not going to be an appeasement. All yedei taruvas. But once it's mixed up, it's in confusion, then yiratzu, then it will be an appeasement. We have a special pasuk where Rabbi Eliezer will allow a mum to go on the altar because it's in a mixture. Specific because it's in a mixture. That's going back to our answer, this is an Ella. When the Gemara says Ella, it's retracting from the answer that we gave before, that this is according to Rabbi Akiva, and it's a special type of mum. It's not what we're dealing with. Dealing with that Rebbe Lezer holds that a mum is only a problem when it's on its own, but if it's in a confusion, if it's mixed up with other animal, then it will appease. Okay. Rabbanan, what do they do with the pasuk that says mumbam? It says mumbam would leiratu ha'avar mum yiratu. They learned something totally different. They say that while the mum is there, it's not an appeasement. But if it's a passing mum, if it's a temporary mum, broken limb that heals, so then that would be acceptable once it heals. Interesting.
I didn't, because a lot of times we learn that they just leave it to graves. So it seemed like this was never the case.
No,
like
when
once it got a mum, like I said, it was stuff to graze and died, like probably a process.
Yeah, so when they would leave it to graze, they wanted it to get a mum that's a mum kavua. It's not a mum oiver. They wanted to get a permanent mum, not a temporary mum. Temporary mum wouldn't solve the problem. temporary mum could heal. The animal could be brought back, yeah. So the halacha about a temporary mum is what the Rabbanan do with the pasuk of mum bum. Rabbi Lezer used the pasuk mum bum to tell me only when it's alone, not in a confusion. And the Rabbanan say mum bum teaches me only while the mum is there, not after it passes. Rabbi Lezer, how does he know that if the mum passes that it's acceptable? He says bum bahem. Look at that pasuk. You would have two words there. What was the pasuk? Kimashchasam bahem mum bum. It says both bahem and bum. So bum teaches me specifically to the exclusion of if it's in a mixture, and mashchasam bahem means only while it has the mum, but not after it passes. The Rabbanan say bum bahem leidarshi. They don't learn both from both of those words. They only learn from the mum bum, and so therefore that's what they're left with. Is that only if the mum passes, if the blemish passes, it would be acceptable. But they don't learn that if it's in a mixture, that you're allowed to bring it up on the altar. If that's the case of Rabbi Lezer, that Rabbi Lezer says that only while it's in the mixture, you're allowed to bring it up. He learns from Mambam. So what does he mean? Roya, he says, I view it as if it's wood. Why do you say as if it's wood? As if it's fuel? Remember, Rabbi Lezer said, you put it up not because you're offering it, you're putting it up because, but what's the problem with offering it? Harachman Achrei, the Torah says, the Eibishter says that he only doesn't want it when it's alone. But when it's in a mixture, then it's perfectly fine. Where it says, L'divrayim karmalahu. This is Rabbi Lezer not saying his own opinion. This is Rabbi Lezer in his polemics, in his argument with the sages. It says, L'didi rachmana achrei. For me, for my purposes, I don't need to argue with you. I don't need to tell you anything. For me, it's perfectly fine. You just take it up and put it on the altar. But according to you that hold that you don't put it on the altar when it's in a mixture and it has a mum, at least you should agree to me that you can put it on the altar for another reason. Even you, that I know that you argue with me, but practically you should agree with me that it should still go on the altar. That just like this is following the view of Rabbi Yehuda, that says that everyone agrees if basar oila, if a vari oila, if limbs from a burnt offering get mixed up with limbs of a sin offering, that they are both put on the altar. The whole machlekes according to Rabbi Yehuda was if it's limbs of an oila that got mixed with limbs of an oila with a blemish. The Rebbe Lezer says yes, the Chacham say no. So Rebbe Lezer is telling the Chachamim, you should agree to me that here it should at least go on the altar for your reasons, because you hold that it could be considered like fuel. Just like you said when it was limbs of an oila that got mixed with the chatas. You said it was no problem, you just view it like fuel. So you should put this on as well. And the Gemara says, the Rabbanan respond, the Rabbanan, over here, it's a balmum. It's disgusting to put a sacrifice with a blemish on the altar. Over there, it was another sacrifice. It's not a problem to put it on the altar. It doesn't belong on the altar, but it's not disgusting. It was a chatas, a regular kosher chatas. So over there, we're ready to use it as fuel.
That other case you just mentioned, that will over last week.
Case, which case?
Because I'm confused because it seems like it came back again where one is allowed because the other one is allowed.
No, that's going to come up soon. That's something else. Wait for that.
But last week we had something similar.
Yeah. We're going to have it again. We didn't get into that. Okay. We have a Mishnah now, a new Mishnah. It says, Ivarim be'ivarim bali moment. Here would be the case that Rabbi Yehuda, we had the case of the previous Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is the case of the second Mishnah. Now, if you have limbs of a carbon oila, and these limbs do not have any blemish, the animal doesn't have a blemish, perfect. But however, it gets confused with limbs of an oila that does have a blemish. Rabbi Lezer says in Karav Reish Achim, once one of them is brought, Yikru Kol HaRashim, then you can bring all the rest. Why does Rebbe Lezer need to do this? Rebbe Lezer could just say, you just bring it up, because it says mum bum. Because our Mishnah is not following Rabbi Yud. Our Mishnah is following that if there's a machlekes by Ivari Chatas, like a mix with Ivari Oila, where Rebbe Lezer says you can bring it up. What about if it gets mixed with Bali Mumin? There you have to, it's only if, then you don't bring it up. This is a different opinion. This is confusing because in the Gemara, we're going back to in the Gemara, we were following a different opinion. Okay. You see the logic of Rabbi Eliezer here in this Mishnah is that we say once one head of the animal was offered, then we assume that the one that we didn't want to offer was already offered. This is the expression. These expressions. How does Rashi put it here? Talina nisura bay. We assume that the prohibited one was already offered. Okay, so let's see. We'll see in the Gemara. We'll see a little more. We'll see in the Gemara. Krayim shalachim. Let's say it was what's the krayim? The thighs, the legs, the thighs of one of them. Then you can offer up all the other thighs because we say the bad one that had the mum in it, is not a problem. Even if all of them are brought and there's only one that's left over, still that last one may be the one that you're not allowed to offer. And you have to take it out and burn it outside. So where do we view the prohibited one to be? Is a machlekes Rebbe Lezer and the Chacham. Rebbe Lezer say it went first. The Chacham say it's possibly going last. Amar Rebbe Lezer. This Rebbe Lezer is not Rebbe Eliezer. There's a mosquito flying around. The Rebbe Lezer explained. Rebbe Lezer ben Pedas. He explains Rabbi Eliezer. Rebbe Lezer says, Rabbi Eliezer only allowed to offer it up if you're going to offer it two at a time. This is what you were telling me. So, but if you're offering one at a time, then we don't say that. No, this is one little extra logic that we have over here, where we say that since one of them is definitely acceptable, so we're going to say that migu, that one is acceptable to be brought up because one of them is not with the mum, right? There's only one here with the mum. Since one of them doesn't have a mum, so we're going to say that the one that's with it also doesn't. Migu, that this is acceptable, this is also acceptable. So we have two logics here. One is we say that the one that was brought was already the one with the mum. Plus, the one that's being brought now is definitely doesn't have a mum, and so therefore the one that's being brought with it is acceptable. Masiv Rab Yirmiyah has a question on Rebbe Lezer. Yeah, they're contemporaries. But Yirmiyah tells to Rebbe Lezer, he says, Chachamim Maimrim, it would have been Esvei if he told it directly to him. He just asked the question in general to the yeshiva. He says, what are you telling me that Rabbi Eliezer says you have to take two at a time? The Chachamim argue with Rabbi Eliezer. And the Chachamim say that even if you brought up all of the heads, you still can't do the last one because maybe that's the one that's prohibited. He says, 1 second, what do you mean the last one? If you want to tell me a case that Rabbi Eliezer would agree, or Rabbi Eliezer would argue that you should be able to bring it up, then you can't tell me that all of them were brought up except for the last one. You would have to tell me all of them were brought up except for the last two, because Rabbi Eliezer only allows you to bring it up when there are two there. So you're telling me a case, even if they were all brought except for the last one, turns out that Rebbe Lezer would agree that you can't bring that as well. And that would not be a contrast between the Chachamim and Rebbe Lezer. So that Rebbe Yirmiyah's kasha and Rebbe Lezer, you say that Rebbe Lezer needs two to be brought at a time. So why does it say if they're all brought except for the last one? Amalai. A lot of confusions over here, and the name Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah Bar Tachlifa. Yirmiyah Bar Tachlifa is explaining is answering Rabbi Yirmiyah's question. Let me just see how the sheet of Metzah says this. Oh, it wasn't Rabbi Yirmiyah that asked the question. It was Rabbi Yaakov asked the question to Rabbi Yirmiyah according to the sheet of Metzah. Rabbi Yaakov asks to Rabbi Yirmiyah, but then why is it massive? It should be Esvei. That's a problem. The word massive is only used when we know the name of the person that's asking the question, but we don't have the name of the person that is being asked to. The word Esvei is used when you have both the names of both, and Meisvei is when you don't have the names of any. This is massive. This is a funny girsay here. And then so what happens now? Amar Lai, Rabbi Yirmiyah Bar Tachlifa, I guess, says back to Rabbi Yaakov. That's what it would be. Asberullah. He says, let me explain to you. I'll explain it to you. Ma yachad zug echad. It doesn't mean the last one. It means the last pair. Yeah, and this is an easy teretz. If you told me that you won't be able to bring it up anyway, according to the Chachamim, according to Rebbe Lezer, you won't be able to bring it up because it's only one at a time. So the answer is that it's not only the last one, it's the last pair, which means there's two there. In the Rebbe Lezer would hold that you could bring it up. It's the Chachamim that say that you can't. Yeah, that's what I have in the text, but I'm adjusting it. Oh, okay. The Shita Mekubetzes, it's not like that. In the Shita Mekubetzes, Rabbi Yaakov asked to Rabbi Yirmiyah, and then the answer back would be they mixed it up a bit. Kedam shenesarev b'mayim. If you have the blood of a korban that got mixed into water, yeah, it stops looking like blood. I think when it mixes into water, it starts to look pink. Anyway, it gets mixed in with water. And yesh b'maris dam kosher. If it still looks like blood, then it's going to be you're allowed to sprinkle it. It's still blood. You see, when it comes to the blood, we don't go after the taste. And when it comes to kosher, that's in a mixture of kosher, non-kosher, we say, what does it taste like? 1 in 60. Over here, we're just looking not for the taste, we're looking for the color. If it looks like blood, then it's blood. That's good enough when it comes to the sprinkling of the blood on the altar. Nisarev biyayin. Oh, this is getting confusing, right? If the blood mixes with wine, now it's red wine. So now everything looks like blood, right? Right. But here we're talking about the blood that came out from the animal. It's still on that day. So Ryan, I say kilo mayim. We view. Let's assume it says we view the wine as if the wine is water. It's a safe assumption to say that's the pshat in the Mishnah, right? We view the wine as if it's water. And what happened when we had blood that got mixed in with water? If it still looks like blood, you could sprinkle it. So here as well, it got mixed with wine, so it's gonna look like blood because the wine itself looks like blood. So how do I know if the blood is still blood? So I have to imagine that the wine is water. And what would be if I had this ratio of wine to water? Blood to water. What would it look like? If it would look like still blood, then you can sprinkle it. Nisarev b'dam behema or b'dam chaya. Let's say it got mixed in with literally blood, but not from a sacrifice. So Roy and I say kilo mayim. We do the same thing. We do the mundane blood, the animal that wasn't the sacrifice, the blood of the non-sacrificial blood. We view it as if it's water, and then you have to imagine that the blood that got mixed in, would it look like water? Would it still look like blood? Then you can sprinkle it. If not, then you can't sprinkle it. Rabbi Yehuda, he argues on the sages, and he says, Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, in dam bevatel dam. This is the famous Rabbi Yehuda. He holds min b'mina lebatal, that if you have the two of the same type, instead of becoming nullified, one and the other one, which that's typical of what we say, Yehuda says exactly the opposite. He says that it actually strengthens itself. That blood can never nullify other blood. The same type doesn't nullify the same type, it just strengthens it. So therefore, you don't have to view it as if it's water and then see, would it be blood? Not if it's the same type, then it's the same type. What would he say by the wine? It won't nullify because there's both blood. It's Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah. He say the same thing by the wine. He would say the same thing by the wine because it's maybe not. Maybe just because it looks like it doesn't mean that it is. Okay. Nisarev b'dam psulim. Let's say it gets mixed in with blood of an animal that's not allowed to be sprinkled. What was wrong with it? Whether the animal was a sin was committed with it, or it was slaughtered with the wrong intentions. So what happens now? Yishafich la'ama, you have to pour the blood down the drain. The amma is the spring that goes through the temple that cleans the floor. When they want to do that, they block it up, and then it washes use a, what's it called in Israel? Sponge. They use that thing. So you just have to put it down the drain. What happens with b'dam tamtzis? This is not a puzzle carbon. This is just the remainder of the blood that's in the animal that's not used for zrika. So it's the same thing. Yishafech lama. It has to be poured down the drain. Rabbi Lezer machsher. Rabbi Lezer says that this is acceptable. Imlei nimlach v'nasan kasher. Lezer machsher. Okay. Imlei nimlach is a new case. It's not a continuation of Rabbi Lezer. That's even the Tanakama would agree that if the person doesn't ask what to do after this mixture, and he just throws it on the altar, it's going to be kosher. It's only what to do if you would ask. But if you don't ask, right? If you don't want the answer, don't ask the question. So if he doesn't ask and he does it, so it's going to be acceptable. It's going to be kosher. It's only a decree of the Chachamim. So b'di'evid, it's not a problem. Okay. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba and Rabbi Yechanan. Yeah, Rabbi Chia bar Abba is the famous student of Rabbi Yechanan. Every 30 days he reviewed everything Rabbi Yechanan taught him. And so everything he says is accurate from Rabbi Yechanan. He says, Lo shanu ela shenaflu mayim b'lesteich dam. So we're going to make a distinction here. We said in the Mishnah that if blood mixes with water, so then we have to view we have to see if it still has an appearance of blood. If it still has an appearance of blood, then you can still sprinkle it. So this is only going to be acceptable if the water fell into the blood. Aval nafal dam l'teich mayim, but if the blood fell into the water, and as you have a bucket of water and it goes drip, 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 blood dripping into it, rishon batal, we say that each one is going to be nullified, even though afterwards it comes back after many drops, and now it looks like blood. You say it's too late; it was already nullified. You don't take it back. It says Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, "Olenian kisui eina kain." It's a mitzvah when someone shechts a bird or a wild animal that you have to cover the blood. We know this from kaparas, right? This doesn't apply to a regular animal, only to a bird or to a wild animal. So what happens if this blood fell into water, and then more blood falls in? And then more blood falls in, and then more blood falls in, until it appears now to be blood. You have to cover this. When it comes to mitzvahs, we don't say that there's rejection. It's only by karbanos that we say that it gets rejected. When the blood fell in, that first drop of blood was rejected from being offered. It's called dichoy, rejection. It can't now be offered on the altar. So the only case where we would have where the blood is mixed with water, that it's going to be acceptable is when water mixed into the blood. Drip, drip, drip. So then we don't say that it was ever rejected until it's not visible as water. But if it's the other case, we say it's rejected. However, when it comes to kisei adam, since by a mitzvah, Rav Papa is saying, we don't say rejection, So even if the blood is dripping into the water, it comes back and it becomes, you see the blood is there. Amr Shlakish says, this is a big sugya. And this is a big sugya in Teruvus. Shlakish says, they have three prohibited foods. This guy's really trying to get a bunch of sins over here. It's before Yom Kippur. Nayig and Lassis Avera Kala. He wants to get into any Averas. He's going to get a few sins in before Yom Kippur. So he takes pigel. That's this meat that had the wrong intentions, right? Out of the nicer was actually left over, or tamei. The meat was tamei. A sacrifice was tamei. And he starts to eat it together. It's like a big Mac, like a big sandwich. He puts like a slice. He's going to eat the whole thing. So each one has a kazayas. And he eats them, he's pater. He's not going to get malchus. Not like he didn't do a prohibition, but he's not going to get malchus. The reason for this is the problem here is called hasra safek. What is he supposed to warn him for? There's witnesses there. Someone's going to warn him. They say, don't eat that, that's tamei. One second, but maybe while he's swallowing it, yes, majority of what he's swallowing is the nicer, not the tamei. And in every bite that he takes, there's three things here. One of them could be the majority over the other one. So we don't know which one is going to be the majority. And when he's swallowing it, it's called hasra safek, because you can't warn him for in case it's this, in case it's this, in case it's this. So hasra safek, the person says, one of the reasons for hasra safek is the person doesn't take him serious. So that's not what I'm doing. So you warned me. I didn't realize that was the real thing.
They can't just try to charge the person with everything in the books and then hope that something sticks.
Interesting. So because you never know which one is going to overpower the other one with the rules of bittul. Gemara says, "Shmami not las." You just taught me 3 halachas, Rish Lakish. First of all, I have to introduce that the way bittul works is that everything in the world should be heter, should be permissible. One thing that's prohibited. When something that's prohibited, that has that uniqueness that is prohibited, falls into something else that's permissible, so it loses the uniqueness and it goes to its default status of being permissible. The uniqueness falls off; it gets nullified. That's the pshat, nullified. It's not unique anymore, and it becomes absorbed into the rest of the world, which is the default, which is heter. But now what we're saying is that if there's mixed with something else that's prohibited, even though the default should be heter, but here we're saying that one thing that's prohibited could actually nullify something else that's prohibited, which is a big chiddush. That Isser could nullify other Isser. Shema Mina, another chiddush that we have is Noisin Tam Beroiv Lav Deraisa. We have a problem over here. Usually we say something's nullified 1 in 60. Over here, it's not 1 in 60. It's 1 in 2 or 1 in 3, right? Because he has 3 pieces of meat. And we're saying that, look, there's no question that it's less than 1 in 60, that it's more than 1 in 60. The flavor of this meat going into the other food the flavor is going to be there. And we're assuming here that it's min b'sheina mina. Let's say one was a carbon mincha. Let's say one was an animal, right? So what we're saying is that the flavor's there, and nevertheless we say that it's going to be nullified. But 1 second, I thought the flavor, it's 1 in 60, right? The flavor, it gives the flavor 1 in 60. But he said that's only rabbinic. That's not midiraisa. Because you see, it's not getting malchus. Third halacha is shema min asra safek leishmi asra. The third halacha is, obviously, if you can't warn him if you don't know exactly which sin he's committing, it's not considered a warning. Yeah?
Strengthen each other.
Yeah, that was when it's the same. First of all,
with the blood.
That was with the blood. That was Rabbi Yehuda that says min b'minai. That was Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that the wine strengthens each other. Here we're not going in Rabbi Yehuda. We're going in the sages. right? And we're saying that, but even that, right here, we're assuming that it's min b'sheina minai. Its flavor of the meat is going into the flavor of a carbon mincha, which is a meal offering. Not the same flavor. That's the assumption. That's what Rashi says. Kasal kadaitach. It's like 8 lines from the bottom. Rashi. Kasal kadaitach hashta.
And this idea that the bucket is full of water and that the water is dropping, is that like is that the same as like everything is prohibited and then it becomes permissible as like does that line up?
It could. There is a concept. There is a concept of if you have heter on the bottom and then a drop of something falls into it, say that it's batal. Another drop falls into it, say that that drop is batal also. And there is a concept of chayser b'neir where it gets reawakened, but there's also a concept where it actually becomes batal, even though there's more than 1 in 60. It's always it's a possibility like that. Well, there's a bunch of details. Masiv Rava asked the question. If you have a mixture of grains, you have a mixture of wheat and you mix it with rice. Now, wheat, there's a halacha that when you make bread with wheat, you have to take a pinch off it and separate it. You have to give it to, it's actually, it's either 1 in 24. If you're a homeowner, it's 1 in 48. If you're a baker, or nowadays you just do a kazayas from the whole thing. You just do a pinch. Just one, that would only be if it's wheat. But let's say you have a mixture of grains here. You have wheat and rice. Rice, you don't have to take challah from rice. So it says that yichayev b'challah. Afal gav, the ruba iris, even though the majority is the rice. 1 second. Why are you taking challah? You told me before that the flavor, why are you taking challah? Because the flavor of the wheat and the rice is not batal. Even if the majority is the rice, but the flavor is still there. It's not 1 in 60 or something. The flavor is there, and we're saying Yechayev and Challah. So Yechayev and Challah, that contradicts what we learned from Rish Lakish, that something is nullified even if the flavor is there, but that's only rabbinic. And here you're saying Yechayev and Challah. It sounds like Midaraisa. The Gemara says, no, Midarabanan. You're only taking Challah rabbinically. It's not actually Midaraisa. Yihachi, that's the case in Maseifa. If you read a little further in that Mishnah or Brisa that we quoted, that Rav is quoting, where is it? It's a Mishnah in Chala, Perak Gimel, Perak Gimel Mishnah Zayin. But there it says that Adam Yetzi Ba Yedei Chevasa BePesach. A person can fulfill his obligation on Pesach with this. He's Sephardic, he's eating rice on Pesach. But whatever the case is, he can consider it matzah. 1 second, why is it considered matzah if the majority is rice? We know that matzah cannot be rice. Matzah needs to be wheat. You say, well, don't worry, because the flavor of the wheat is not batal, because it's you can still taste it. So obviously, if you're yaitze matzah, it must be that it's a deraisa that the flavor is not batal. Gemara says, Ella b'she'ene minai b'taima min b'minai beruba. What we're going to do over here is we're going to do like this. We're going to say that the case that we were talking about over there was that it's min b'minai. Why do we say that it's batal? Because it was actually all different types of meat. Instead of being one meat and one flour, what we're saying is that it's all different types of. It's all meat. It's all meat. Therefore, if it's the same flavor, then we don't say that the flavor is recognized and it's a daraisa. We say that it's actually batal, right? Say that the flavor will be batal b'rayv. However, if it's a different flavor, for example, wheat going into rice, that would be deraisa. Min b'sheni min b'taima. That gives off. That's going to give a flavor midaraisa. It's not going to be batal. Min b'minai, but if it's in the same flavor, then that's going to be b'rayv. And so instead of talking about meat with the carbon mincha before, talking about 2 types of meat. In other words, Reish Lakish would agree that this would be problematic, because halacha would not apply if it was meat together with a meal offering. Okay. We're on the top, second to the top line. The Nishar has like a bit of a discussion there. Let's leave it for tomorrow. Nishar. We're on Ayin Chesed Bez. We're on the right page. It's good. Yeah, have a good day, everyone.